obviously Encanto is a movie that's sort of in keeping with Disney's, you know, diversity initiatives and things like that. Although I will, for my part, I will say it doesn't read that way to me. It doesn't read any differently than like an Aladdin does, which is to say that it's really just about people and it's about a particular set of characters, and it does not it doesn't drive the kind of woke culture stuff. I don't know, maybe if you guys got a different perspective, but I didn't really get any of that. I got, they're just trying to tell a story, and I am always here for that all the time. I don't know, Jen, Paul, did you guys get a different take on that at all?
No, I agree with you on this one. It like you could have dropped that story into pretty much anywhere, any setting in the world, and made like the jokes like fit the culture that it was dropped into.
It's a very universal story.
Everywhere.
Like it's a very universal, like, family story in general.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
all of those things I think we find super relatable because they're things that we've all experienced. Like your parents putting a lot of pressure on you is something that everybody has probably experienced at some point or another, or you just putting a lot of pressure on yourself even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what Disney's animated movies and Pixar's movies have done so well, and why they're so popular, is that even though they might be representing a different culture, like Moana, like Raya, like this movie, it doesn't really matter. It's a story about humans. It's a story about that connection that we have with each other, and that is pretty much universal. So, like Jen said, you could change the jokes and put it in any culture, any time, and this movie would still work. And I mean, you could really do that with any Disney movie. Maybe even Lions, you could make this work.
Perhaps crabs and flounders and various sea creatures you could do this with.
Perhaps.
Talking furniture, even
talking furniture, or maybe even toys. You could do it with you could possibly do it with toys. Look, there's a lot. I think one of the things that I react to negatively with the kind of diversity driven content that we talk about a lot. The thing that I think is wrong with doing that is when you are erasing the need to tell a story in favor of some political agenda. And I don't really see that happening here. And what I mean is, like, if this movie had a character whose sole purpose was to deliver like 2021 political screeds about racism or something like that, it would not fit the environment or the story or anything that they're trying to tell. It would be out of place, and it would be something that really didn't make any sense, except for you would see the agenda being worn on the movie's sleeve. And this movie doesn't really do that. And I appreciate that, because almost every time that happens in a film or a TV show or whatever, it's terrible writing, it's terrible storytelling, and it completely takes you out of the actual story. And also it's obnoxious because it's usually something that is sort of the opposite of the theme here, which is, understanding and forgiveness and trying to empathize with people whose experiences you don't fully understand, right? If you were to take this theme and then drop a character in the middle of it that was like, basically, men are evil, which, Disney does from time to time, like, it would really undercut the point of the movie. And also it would be, just terrible writing, because it would be somebody's sort of weird political agenda sort of ham-fistedly crammed into the whole thing. I think that's the thing that most people react negatively to. And again, I don't really see it here, so I don't really see that as a problem. But to the point of the question, like, do we think it's a good or a bad thing that Disney sets these kinds of movies in different cultures? Personally, I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't know. I think it's fantastic when people get an opportunity to experience a little bit of some other part of the world, even if it's not the perfect representation or whatever. I don't think I don't know. We talk about turning cultures into a product or into a commodity or something, but like there's only so many ways you can introduce somebody. Like you're looking at creating content for an American audience that, you know, and you're taking elements of South American, you know, probably sort of Colombian, Central American kind of characters, and you're Americanizing a lot of them. You're anglicizing a lot of it, but like you're going to need to do that in order to connect with the actual audience. I don't see how that's a bad thing. I think all it does is really just make people just a little bit more open to, you know, to taking a look at other parts of the world and to seeing people in other parts of the world as people, you know, as just kind of the same. And personally, I like that. I don't know. Jen, did you?
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the movie Luca. Mm-hmm. And it was just such a delightful movie. And even though it's obviously geared towards, you know, a very anglicized, very American audience, my husband, a first generation Italian immigrant, you know, it spoke to him in ways that other content hasn't before. And when you have these kinds of movies like Encanto and Coco and Raya, I mean, it's not for the people who still live in those locations and cultures. It's largely for the first and second generation immigrants here. And it's this wonderful blend that gets presented. And it's just, it's very delightful because they tend to feel very seen and very appreciated. And everybody else appreciates it too, and in ways that they didn't think that they could before.
I think it also adds
an element, a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think it also adds an element of you know, uniqueness and interest to the story itself. Again, I'll pull back to, you know, something like Aladdin or whatever, which I think is very similar in the sense that like Aladdin is very obviously not you know, culturally perfectly a representation of, you know, of Persian culture, right? Like it is very much not exactly right in a whole lot of ways. It's, first of all, it's like entirely anachronistic compared to its, you know, its setting. But that said, it gives you a very interesting exotic environment that you are not familiar with, that adds a lot of interest to the story. It adds a lot of like stylistic and sort of cultural details that you can sort of draw on as a storyteller, which are interesting and sort of fun to draw on. But as an audience member, it's just kind of neat. And it makes you wonder, like, what is that part of the world like? What is that part of history like? What are these people like? And again, I don't see any way that that's not a bad, like that could be a bad thing personally, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with both of you. It annoys me when people get upset about that stuff. I mean, you see stuff like this all the time, not just in movies, but with like restaurants and stuff like that. And it's just kind of, it just leaves me feeling like, ugh, like why do you care about this? But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're making art, if you tell a good story with relatable characters, it doesn't matter what they look like or where they're from, people will connect with it. And that's what Disney does so well. And we talked about the short earlier. I felt more like a raccoon than I ever have in my entire life. And never thought that sentence would ever come out of my mouth. But darn it, Disney did it. And like it doesn't matter. It could be a freaking raccoon and you can identify it. I mean, one of the biggest movies of all time are about lions. Like, what? It makes no sense on the surface, but
it doesn't matter because it's about the characters, right?
Exactly.
Like it's just about the characters. I think one of the beautiful things about animation and about the medium itself is that you can do allegorical storytelling more in a more pure way than you can do in any other kind of genre. I think this is the same reason why I like fantasy stories and sci-fi stories and things like that. You can talk about themes and ideas in a really intense, really direct way. Talking about this short, for example, like, so I actually really don't want to spoil this short for anybody, but it's essentially about a raccoon, like a raccoon Kit, who is experiencing some things for the first time with his mom or her mom. And, the mom's trying to be protective and trying to keep the little baby raccoon out of danger. And that is such an incredibly universal concept. You could do it with any animal, like you could literally do it with any character that you could buy as having a parent and child relationship. So like you could do it with robots for that matter. I mean, you could absolutely do it with any type of thing. But I think the thing that's sort of magic about it is that it allows them to like kind of not pull any punches. And this story really doesn't. Like this story really like this 8-minute short or whatever. And it really like hits hard on parenting and the way that the way that even a well-intended parent trying to keep their child out of danger can cause psychological damage to a child long-term by being overprotective, and by being protective in a certain kind of way. And like, they really didn't pull any punches on that at all. And they can do that because it's not human beings. Like if they did that with human characters, you'd be like, oh, ooh, that's, But like with raccoons, you can go pretty far. And they did.